Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Roundabout Books' special Sunday author series with the authors of a new series called Trillium Sisters. My name is Julie, and I am the events manager at Roundabout Books. And we are so grateful for these two authors to be joining us from both of the coasts this day. So this is a blessing of Zoom right now with everything going on. We're able to welcome authors that maybe normally wouldn't get a chance to visit Bend, Oregon. So remember that all of our videos of our events are on our YouTube channel, so please check those out if you weren't able to make one. And we have copies of this book in the store, so please stop by or give us a call to get your copy of Trillium Sisters. Our authors today are Laura Brown and Elly Kramer. I'm going to give you just a little bit of their bio. Laura is an early childhood expert, collaborates with businesses and organizations to create high quality educational media property and products. She has written curricula and scripts and served as content expert, and research director for series produced by Nick Jr., Disney Jr., Amazon Kids, DreamWorks Animation Television, PBS Kids, and many more. She is joining us from Tenafly, New Jersey. But I do love this. It says, but in another life, she would happily live in a treehouse in the forest. That's true. Perfect. Elly Kramer is currently the VP of Production and Development and Imagine Entertainment, in their Kids and Family division, and has created and led the development of numerous award-winning and highly rated TV shows. Let's see here. As VP of Production and Development for Nickelodeon, she led the development of long and short-term content. She has also produced and developed over 35 shorts. Elly is joining us from LA. Thank you so much, East and West Coast. So ladies, I am very excited to hear you talk about this. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit more about it. And then at the end, we will have some time for Q&A and more info about how they can get these books. So please take it away.
Well, good morning. And Julie, thank you so much for having us. And I have not been to Bend, Oregon, but I look forward to visiting you one day soon, maybe when it's a little bit cooler, and I hope you're all staying cool and safe. But thank you so much for having us. This is really, a highlight. And I think an unexpected joy for both Laura and I. Like, the writing has been joyful, and this process has been actually this surprisingly joyful part as well. So thank you for having us. And I have to apologize because I'm outside a window where there's a little bit of traffic. Hopefully it won't be too loud. But anyway, so hi everybody, I'm Elly Kramer. And people always like to hear our backstory a little bit about how Laura and I both met and how we sort of got to this point. And so we like to start our story off where a lot of good stories start off, which is in the ladies' room. And essentially, we worked together. I was at Nickelodeon for many years. Laura worked with me when I was at Nickelodeon, among her many other jobs at other networks. And we were working on one show in particular together. And I was the network executive on the show. And Laura was working with us from the education and curriculum perspective. And we were at a writing brainstorm up in Toronto. We're in the ladies' room on a break, and we both started talking about how we've always wanted to write. It was almost like a dirty secret, like, I want to do this. Do you want to do this? And I always joke because I said to Laura, do you want to try to write together? And I always felt like I was asking her out on a date. And she said, yes. And so I popped the question, she said yes. And we ended up co-writing 4 scripts together for this particular show. And it was just this really wonderful collaboration that after we submitted the last script, we said, this shouldn't be the end, this should be the beginning of our collaboration. And we said, let's see what ideas we have and what we can come up with. And 3.5 years later, here we are. But there's a little bit more backstory, which I'll throw to Laura and she can fill in some of the blanks.
Yeah, that is definitely how it started. So we were thinking about what we might want to write about. And I had gone on a family trip to Colorado skiing. I'm the worst skier in my family. So my family was off doing the bump runs, which I totally can't do. And I went down one of those slow catwalks so that I could just admire the mountain. And I got to this stand of Douglas firs, and the sun was shining. It was one of those warm spring ski days. And I just couldn't believe how beautiful it was. I had to pull over. I was looking at these trees and I started imagining what was beyond those trees. Maybe there was a village where everybody lived in tree houses. And maybe there were no cars and people ziplined and kayaked to work and wherever they had to go. And maybe it was the kind of place where everybody lived harmoniously with the nature on the mountain. Maybe animals wandered in and out of the village and there were special things so that nobody disturbed each other. And I came home and I told Elly about it because it was one of those ideas that I just couldn't stop thinking about, which is the kind of idea that always gets me. And Elly was, I think, equally as excited by that. So we sort of had the setting and the world. And then Elly, go ahead. Do you want to tell about the characters?
Sure. So similar to writing for television, you need the setting, you need the world, and then you need the characters and sort of what grounds them. And I really felt what Laura was pitching, and I could see that it would be right for stories. And I've always wanted to tell stories that revolve around families. I feel like, it's one of those universal things. They look different for everyone, but everyone has a family. And we also know for our demographic, family is, and Laura could certainly speak to this more with her background, but family is everything. And I'm one of three. I have a sister and I have a brother. And growing up, my sister and I were an incredibly close family, but my sister and I, we had a special language. We had inside jokes. It was just, there's nothing like a sister in every way. You play hard with your sister. You can fight hard with your sister. And so I said to Laura, what if they're sisters? And Laura's never had a sister, doesn't have a sister. And I think this was her opportunity to live vicariously through these girls. And so she said, yeah, let's make it this blended family. So we have Dr. J.A., who found these three sisters, and they have a younger brother, Z. Let's make it about this family and these sisters. And that's how Trillium Sisters was created.
Yeah. And the themes in the books, I'll just tell you quickly, and then I am going to read to you from the book. So we're coming. It's coming. We really wanted to show girls who were the heroes of their own story. We call it modern princess magic. That's really what's in these books. It's these three girls who've been gifted something that they know is to be used for the greater good, and they can solve their own problems and save the day with their smarts and what they've been given. But we also really wanted to show that everybody rises together. So they have a single dad who is so nurturing and is able to take care of the whole household, and they have a little brother who's just as strong in his own way. And it's when they all work together that the real magic happens. Because of the setting and because of what's going on in the world, we really wanted environmental themes in the book and how we can live in harmony in nature, and the idea that we're all connected. And if you fall in love with nature, you're going to protect nature. So that's very much the bedrock of the books as well. So enough of the backstory. I am going to talk to you about the first book and read to you from it. So I hope you can see this. So this is, there's a little glare there. There we go. Trillium Sisters Book 1. It's about these three sisters. They're 8 years old. So that's Emmy, and that's Clare, and that's Giselle. And they live on this beautiful alpine mountain that I have described with their father and their little brother Z. And when the book opens, it's their 8th founding day. And I'm going to read to you, and you're going to find out what founding day is. Emmy woke up as the morning sun shone brightly through the window of the treehouse. She stretched in her hammock, reaching in opposite directions with her fingers and toes, and whoops, she accidentally woke her pet bear cub, Claw, who'd been sound asleep next to her. Emmy smiled at Claw. Then, putting her fingers to her lips, she swung her legs gently to the floor. She didn't want to wake her sisters, Giselle and Clare, who were still asleep in their own hammocks. But Claw wasn't good at being quiet. Tap, tap, thud went Claw as her front paws and then her bottom hit the floor. Giselle shot straight up in her hammock. "What's that?" she said. Clare rubbed her eyes. "Hello," she said. "Oh, pine cones," said Emmy. "Sorry we woke you." Giselle and Clare climbed out of their hammocks, gently putting their own pets, an eaglet named Soar and a wolf pup named Fluffy, on the floor. They grinned at Emmy. No one minded being woken on such a special day. "Happy Founding Day," they all cried at once. Then the three sisters ran and threw their arms around one another in a terrifically tight triplet hug. The pets scurried over, and the sisters scooped them up into the hug too. Founding Day was their family's favorite holiday. 8 years ago, on this very day, babies Emmy, Clare, and Giselle had been found in the forest by their father. Their dad, Dr. J.A., was a veterinarian who took care of all the animals who lived on the mountain. But it got a little lonely in the treehouse. Trillville, the village where most people on the mountain lived, was a good 15-minute zip line away. That's why it had seemed almost magical when he'd found the triplets. Ever since that day, the family had celebrated Founding Day like other families celebrated birthdays. On Founding Day, they spent the day together playing games and decorating the treehouse. And Dad always made a special dinner with their favorites, daisy juice and Trillium cupcakes. And there's the girls. You can see them with their pets in their treehouse room. So what happens on Founding Day, because it's their 8th Founding Day, is their dad gives them each a Trillium petal charm. A trillium is a 3-petaled flower. And when they were found in the forest, they had a little enamel petal that makes a trillium flower. He gives it to them on their 8th birthday. And later on in the book, something very magical happens with those charms when there's an emergency. And Elly's gonna skip ahead a little bit in the book and read to you about the emergency that happens.
So the wind had picked up, whipping the current even faster. It pushed Z's log harder. And I should say, actually, before I start reading, that what happens is that Z gets stuck in a river and can't get out. And the sisters hear him and they're called to action. And the cliffhanger is, are they going to be able to save their younger brother Z? So the wind had kicked up, whipping the current even faster. It pushed Z's log harder. Snap, one of the vines broke. Ah, screamed Z. Hang on, cried Emmy. Look, called Clare. She pointed to a long branch hidden in the underbrush. Can we reach him with that? Giselle raced over and they tugged at the branch as hard as they could. It won't budge, said Giselle as she pulled with all her might. We need something else. Think, said Clare. Wait, there are 3 of us, said Emmy. Yes, we'll hold hands and stretch to get him, said Clare. Like a human chain, asked Giselle. Exactly, said Emmy. Clare dug her heels into the shore like an anchor and grabbed Emmy's hand. Giselle held Emmy's other hand, and the 2 girls rushed into the water. Since she was the farthest out, Giselle leaned towards Z. She was close enough that her fingertips just brushed the log. Lean farther, Giselle called to her sisters. The trills stepped as wide as they could and stretched until their sides ached. Giselle grabbed for the log again. Her fingertips were closing around the end of it when a wave jostled it away. No, she cried. Help, pleaded Z. I can't hold on anymore. And he started to cry. Z called Emmy. Do not let go. We'll get you. I promise. Okay, Emmy, said Z between sobs. Emmy was looking around frantically when Claw head-butted her in her calf. The minis, of course. Claw could be the anchor to our chain and give us the extra length we need to reach Z, she cried. Claw dug her hind feet into the ground, and holding on to the bear, Clare was able to step farther into the water. The sisters stretched out again toward their little brother. They were so close. Giselle was able to grab the underside of the log. Got it, she exclaimed. She was breathing so hard she could hardly get the words out. Even though Emmy's muscles were screaming, she held on. But then a big wave bumped the log up, and it came down hard into the frothing water, pushing Giselle's hand away. Then snap! Another vine broke. Ah, cried Z. There was only 1 vine left. Emmy felt a sob rise in her throat. She couldn't let it out and scare Z. Then suddenly her hand flew to her neck. And this is an image you can see of the sisters trying to save Z. And this is the apex. This is when the sisters discover their power. This is when the charms combine and they come together. I won't ruin too much, but they and the minimals discovered that they all have powers and they use them together to save Z.
Right. So that's the first book. The first book is about being gifted these charms and discovering that they have these magic powers for emergencies. In the second book, not that much, it's called Bestie Day. I don't know if you can see it, but Bestie Day is the holiday on the mountain when everybody does something nice for their bestie. So they've just found out that they have these magic powers. They're not really sure how they work and they're not really sure what they're for, but on they go with Bestie Day. They decide that they're going to go to the flower field, and I don't know if you can see it here, but they are at the flower field. You see all those beautiful flowers below them? And they're going to use fallen petals to make gifts for each other for Bestie Day because they don't want to hurt the flowers by picking the petals or cutting the flowers. But when they get there, there's some other girls from town who are cutting down almost every fresh flower in the field that they can see. And that's a problem because it's not good for the flowers, but it's also a problem for the bees because the bees rely on the nectar from all those flowers in the flower field. So they have a double emergency. They've got to stop the girls and they've got to save the bees who are actually getting sick. So lo and behold, they learn something about their charms, they power up, and you can read the book to figure out how they save the day in that one.
And fun fact, International Best Friend Day is an actual day, and this year it fell out on Laura's birthday. We don't think it's a coincidence, I'm just gonna say that, but it's an actual day.
It was a lot of fun.
And then book 3, I'm gonna do a sneak peek and show you the cover. Book 3, which comes out in January, and it's called Fashionable Disaster. Can you see that? Okay, excellent. So book 3 was really fun to write. And one of the things Laura and I have really tried to do between every book is try to evolve each story. So that could be showcasing new powers or telling different kinds of stories. And in book 3, it's the first time you actually see interpersonal conflict amongst the sisters, which was a really interesting and fun challenge to write to. So in book 3, the sisters and Z sort of find this natural spring, and it's quite hidden, and they're really taken by it. And they decide to do something that can, in a way, to share it with the rest of the community. And they decide to open a spa. But in order to open a spa, they need funds to do so. And so they decide to create a fashion show, and the proceeds from the fashion show will help open the spa. And the idea is really driven by Clare, and she gets really, really wrapped up in it. And she subsequently becomes quite bossy in the process and sort of shuts her sisters out. And there becomes this real conflict amongst the girls. There's a big fight. And Clare subsequently gets herself into trouble because she hasn't listened to the advice of her sisters. And the whole thing is, will the sisters come back and help Clare and subsequently help her save the day? And will the fashion show happen successfully? And we're not going to ruin it, but that is Fashionable Disaster. And we're just starting to work on book 4 now, which we're really excited about too.
Yeah. You know, there's been some really fun things to think about with this series. So we thought maybe we'd just share these questions with you. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you might want to ask yourself, you might want to think about it. I think I'll just ask the people on the screen right now. So the first really fun thing for us to think about was if you could have any pet, if you lived in this kind of place where the animals just sort of wandered in and out of your life, what pet would you have? I mean, we chose a bear and a wolf pup and an eaglet because it was so fitting for the environment that they're living in. And we also just thought it was really fun. But if you could have any pet, what would you have?
Well, what's your answer to this question?
So, well, it's definitely these 3 animals that we're writing about, but I am also a water person. So I think it would be a dolphin. I have always dreamt of being able to like really swim and dive down deep with the dolphins and understand, you know, they communicate so beautifully, dolphins, what they're actually saying.
Yeah.
And Laura would probably bring her dog, Charlie Brown, even though Charlie probably, that's not the natural habitat, but I have a feeling Charlie would make an appearance on the mountain.
Yeah. Well, Charlie's always with me, except when I do a Zoom, because sometimes she starts to bark, but she's downstairs.
She's the 3rd co-author, we like to say, because she was always in the background as we were writing.
That's right.
Very helpful. You know, I'm very torn. I really like big cats. So, you know, something that's kind of snuggly like that. But I definitely love the dolphin idea. I took my first trip to Hawaii in January and got to see they're smaller dolphins that are off the coast of Maui. They're not the normal bottlenose, but it was so fun. So I think I might have to go with a dolphin too.
Yeah, it would be cool.
Yeah, and it would also give us a new space to explore, Laura. We've done water a little bit, but we haven't really gotten into water on the mountain. So that book 4 there might be a dolphin in our future.
You never know. And the other question that we love when we go to schools and we talk with the kids, and that's super fun. And a question that everybody loves is, what superpower would you have if you could have any superpower at all? So Elly, how about you? What superpower?
I've always been obsessed with flying. Like hot air ballooning is on my bucket list actually to do. There's something about just being able to get that bird's eye view and be able to go anywhere you want anytime that has always really been intriguing to me. So I think I'd like to fly, although a lot of the kids talk about invisibility, and that sounds really exciting too. So maybe I'll be greedy and say invisibility and flight. I want both. I want it all.
I've always leaned toward some sort of teleportation because over the last 10 years, I've spent so much time driving between Bend and Portland. And it gets to that point where I'm just like, if I could just snap my fingers and be at my friend's house, or snap back and be at my parents, or just, and then of course people are like, you know, teleportation has limits or something. And I'm like, no, I want teleportation.
That sounds like a really useful one.
Yeah. And that's something that kids talk about all the time too. When we work with kids, teleportation is a big one that they talk about.
Yeah.
Just be faster.
Yeah.
I think I would be able to talk to any animal, and maybe the trees.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's this new research that trees communicate chemically through their roots, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear the stories they have to tell.
So are you open for a couple of questions from me?
We would love it.
Excellent. So first, with sisters, and Elly, you said you have sisters. How many?
I have one sister and one brother.
Okay. And I myself have a younger sister. So I can tell you that the fighting definitely happened a lot when we were kids. We are very close friends now. Laura, not maybe having a sister, but having friends that maybe were sister-like. Did you pull from any of those relationships when forming these characters?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think growing up, I had two best friends, which, you know, that's an interesting dynamic, three, uneven, right? Because sometimes you're closer to one, sometimes you're closer to the other, sometimes you're the odd man out. So I remember that dynamic of three, and I also have three children. So I see that dynamic in my own children, which I think in some ways is great that you can have all these different ways that it works, but in some ways I think it's really difficult, and those experiences were helpful.
Yeah, for me too. And I think, you know, I think the thing that really resonated with me is that you can, you know, and I see it, like I had a similar experience with my sister. It's like you can fight with your sister in a certain way that you don't fight with anyone else, but like no one would come in between me and my sister. You know, it's that like I will defend her till it's that intensity in every way that I think really spoke to me, at least as I was thinking about these girls. And you know, I think also Laura and I spent, this isn't a direct answer to your question, but just to give you a little bit more insight, we spent a lot of time thinking about who these girls were as individuals and collectively. So we put all these mood boards together, you know, like what kind of music would Clare listen to? What kind of outfits would Giselle wear when she was doing something super athletic? You know, like what would a young Emmy look like? And we have these really deep mood boards. We went really deep, you know, where you ask those questions like, what would Clare do in this situation? What would Emmy do? So it was probably one of the highlights actually as we developed this for me, thinking about the girls both individually and then collectively and how they would work. But I think for me, at least, having a sister, just knowing like we could be fighting, you know, to the death at like 2:00, but like at 2:30, it's like you come for my sister, you're coming for me, you know, it's that kind of relationship.
Absolutely. Gosh, I would kind of love to hear what their music preferences are. That would be a really interesting Spotify playlist to share or something. That would be really fun.
Yeah.
Your illustrator, Sarah, and I'm going to ask one of you to say her last name just so I don't get it wrong either. How do you say it? Mensinga?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
I got it right.
How it is.
Her illustrations are awesome.
Beautiful.
How did you kind of work with her to pick what scenes you wanted illustrated so that, you know, the showing which ones not were more important, just, you know, pulling out that specific scene?
That's a great question. Those decisions were actually made by by our publisher and the art director. But what we got to weigh in on was each round of the sketches that were then done. And we did have a very specific view of what the treehouse looks like, kind of what the world looks like, because that was such an important jumping off point. And also just how the sisters, going back to those mood boards and what we had thought about, how they dress, how each one dresses differently, what that should look like. We had a lot of feedback about that, which Sarah just implemented so incredibly beautifully. And we're so grateful to her for the original imagining and then, the revisions as well.
Yeah, I mean, the covers are just, everything is so eye-catching. I love that you released book 1 and 2 right away. I think, kids, when they find these series, are just, they chomp. Every time we have a kid come in, is the new book in such and such a series out yet? I've already finished the first 10. And, I don't remember that as a kid, because it was a lot of library for me, going to the library, the books would maybe all be there. Was that your decision, a publisher, or collaborative?
It was more of a publisher decision, and I think it speaks to what you were saying, where I think the idea was, and the hope was that kids would get so excited they would read book 1 and they would immediately want book 2, and we wanted to be able to satisfy that need. And I'll say anecdotally, it's been amazing because it seems to really work. I get a lot of feedback and emails saying, like, my kid thankfully was like up all night reading book 1 and like dove right into book 2. So our publisher definitely knows a thing or two about this business.
Absolutely. But I will also say that it felt like such a good fit for us because we're from television. And so one thing that you're thinking about when you first are working on something in development is breadth. Can you tell 52 stories? So our brains were sort of already working that way. So it felt like a good fit.
Yeah, and it is such a visual medium. Sometimes taking a book from a movie, or from a book to a movie, you lose some things. So it's interesting to think of both of you coming from that medium over to books. So I think that's really interesting. This is a question I love to ask pretty much everybody, but also really intensely with children's books. Can you both, besides these, tell me some of your favorite, maybe older and current children's books that either you read or your kids are reading?
Sure. Laura, do you want to
Sure. Yeah. Oh my God. I'm old, so I have so many favorites, I've sort of added up over the years. One character that I never forgot that comes to me in certain situations is Ferdinand the Bull. I loved that book as a child. I loved the message of just sort of being yourself and this bull who just wanted to smell the flowers. I mean, it spoke to me. So that's stayed with me, and when I'm trying to remember to be myself, I think of that character. My mother had the most amazing collection of all of the Wizard of Oz books. Not a lot of people, I'm sure you do because you're a book person, know that it's a series. Yeah. And she would feed them to me. And I think that I first really felt, my favorite genre is fantasy. So that sort of built that love in me as that world expanded and expanded with that series. My kids are grown now, but Junie B. Jones was huge. Ivy and Bean. This is from my childhood and maybe not so politically correct now, but Mrs. Pigglewiggle. I just love the Mrs. Pigglewiggle series and how she came up with solutions for kids. What else, Elly?
I would say for me, growing up, Amelia Bedelia really stands out. I think it speaks to the power of humor. And then few individual books. Alexandra and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day is a book I still will read some days after just those days those rough ones. I love also The Dot is something that really helps me today. Some days where you want to sit and write and create and nothing is coming to you. So those are two sort of singular titles that really speak to me. But growing up, it was the younger years, Amelia Bedelia, and then growing up, I was a big Nancy Drew girl, a big Encyclopedia Brown girl, Babysitter's Club. We were talking about this. Julie was my jam, Sweet Valley High. And Laura has heard me tell both these stories many times, but I was just like a huge reader growing up. Didn't love school as much. I would actually just bring books and like hide them in my desk and just read all day. So that might speak to the lack of math skills at the moment, but that was, and one of my earliest memories is I had this librarian, Mr. Daniels, who would save the new books for me. So I'd come every Friday after school and he would hand me like the fresh new books. And we all know there's like nothing like that book smell. The spine hasn't been broken. And now I have two stepdaughters. The older one is actually incredibly into graphic novels at the moment, and reading series like Amulet. And she's actually reading the Babysitter's Club, but the graphic novel version, interestingly enough. The younger one likes a lot of Mo Willems, and I'm reminded of Mo's brilliance every time I read those books with her. And they both actually really like Dogman. They think Dogman is hilarious. So that's sort of what's in rotation at our house. And Shel Silverstein, sorry, that just popped in. It's like, you know,
Good one.
the OGs.
Absolutely. You know, Ivy and Bean is after my time as a young reader, but now that I see that one, and there are a couple other early series that I'm tempted to just read them for myself, because they seem so just uplifting and so sweet. I also, besides the Babysitter's Club, there was a smaller series called The Fabulous Five, and it was kind of that same thing. They were in, I think it starts them in 6th or 7th grade. But yeah, just those series of, I mean, pretty empowering, because it's always a group of girls and, you know, the guys kind of come and go, but they stay, you know, really tight and that kind of thing. So I hope that you end up writing, you know, 25 of these books and get added to that kind of series canon that all these kids need. Yeah, really exciting to see all the books that are coming out to keep kids actively reading. Let's see, I'm trying to decide if I have any other questions. We know that there's a book 3 and a book 4 coming, so that's really exciting. Anything else that you both are working on that you want to share?
That's a good question.
Terrible yet.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that opportunity. We appreciate that.
Yeah, and you're both still working in television as your.
We are still both working in television. We're constantly talking about ways in which we can continue to work together. We have a few ideas percolating, a few things that we are talking about. Because I want to date Laura forever. I don't want, you know, don't tell my husband, but.
Circling back to the sister conversation, I do not have a sister, but Elly and I call each other sis. That's like our little thing from this series. And one thing I will say is that I feel so incredibly lucky to have a partner like Elly. And we call this our collaborative writing. And it's almost like a different kind of writing than when you're writing on your own. And Elly's just the easiest partner, and you have a lot of communication things that you have to work out when you write together, and so I feel so lucky to have her.
The feeling is very mutual. Laura makes everything better, everything.
I think that's so great, and I think you're right. I mean, you can find a sister at any age. I mean, that's just the beauty of it, and it sounds so lovely to hear you just kind of crossing paths and then finding that soulmate. Well, I want to thank you again so much for being here. You know, Sunday mornings, people might not think of doing a book event, but I'm so glad that it worked out for everyone's schedule to have this conversation. Again, we are so happy to have your book in our stores and your support of an indie bookstore like ours. Do you guys want to give a shout out to your local indie bookstore? Because I think that's fun.
Sure, absolutely. In Glen Rock, New Jersey, Curious Reader.
Nice, awesome. What about you, Elly?
So there's one in Larchmont, Los Angeles, but I don't totally know how to pronounce it. It's spelled in like Chevalier, but I think I'm butchering it. So maybe, but hi, Bookstore in Larchmont. I think you're wonderful and lovely.
Awesome.
But I was never totally clear on how to pronounce it.
And we want to thank you for like all, independent bookstores. I miss. There was one in Tenafly. It's probably been gone 10 years now.
Yeah.
And, you go in and there's recommendations. You guys probably do this, written recommendations, and the people there are so knowledgeable. So I want to give a shout out to all the independent bookstores, and we want to support them in whatever way we can. We think they're really important things to have in the community.
Absolutely. This is technically the first indie bookstore I've worked for. I worked for one of the big ones for about 5 years, and granted, it was one of the only bookstores in Bend at the time, so that was still kind of a local community. But after 2 years at Roundabout, I don't want to work anywhere else. I really love our store, and we have been so grateful and lucky for the support through this time of having to do Zoom and not having as many people in the store. So at some point, hopefully we'll get to see both of you in the store. Laura, if you ever make it to the West Coast, you're in Portland, just pop on down and see us. We would love that. But again, you can pick up their books at our store. We are open Monday through Thursday, 10 to 6, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 10 to 5. Available on our website, roundaboutbookshop.com. If you don't feel comfortable coming in the store, we are still doing red bench pickup, and we will wrap it in gift wrap for you. So with that, ladies, again, thank you so much for being here, taking time out of your Sunday. Really excited about your books, and we wish you the best of luck on the next ones.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It was a
you.
joy. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Great rest of your weekend.
You too.
You too.